Thank you all for coming. Yes, as was said, this is the Cutting Edge Post-Production panel, and we are coming to you live from our own homes via Zoom and hologram because, you know, the most introverted department in the production. No, in reality, we're really excited to have these guys here and to talk about whatever it is that you guys are wondering about with post-production. And all these guys are going to go into their backgrounds in post here in a moment, but whether it be, again, color, visual effects, editing, any of these post-production supervision, we would love to answer your questions. And so if you've not been in any of these before, just so that you all know, this is not a mad dash scramble to the microphone. We have a QR code here, or you can go to CWVFF.com/poll and use the Poll Everywhere tool to enter your questions and vote up, vote down the questions for which you have interest. And the great thing is, if you are at home on the live stream, you can participate as well. Please do. We would love to see those questions come in and, yeah, see what the burning things are that you want to know about post. So, with all of that, yes, I guess you could start doing it. You could, in theory. What questions do you guys want to answer? So, with all that out of the way, would love to get these guys to introduce themselves. We'll start at this end with John-Clay. If you could introduce yourself, what you do, your background.
My name is John-Clay Burnett, and I've done post-production for at least 15 years. I've been involved in editing feature films, feature documentaries, done color, and even helped post-supervise and bring in some other team members to do full post on a few projects.
I'm David Beal. I've been doing visual effects and motion graphics for about as long as John-Clay here, and notably worked on Beyond the Mask, which is a movie by the Burns and you, right? John-Clay. John-Clay, did you DP? Okay, he helped. He helped. Okay, he probably did more than help, but there's a whole sequence with electrical effects near the end of the movie, so I was sort of tasked with taking that. And so even when it comes to visual effects, my contribution to the film has tended to be more motion graphics-y or more eye candy. If it glows, if there's light, if it looks like a visual effect, you know, when it's up there, then that's what I'm working on.
I'm Bill Ebel. I'm the old man of the crew. I've been editing for 25, almost 30 years. Started in TV commercials and then started feature films with Fireproof and have been editing since then. So 16 years, I guess, in features. Yeah.
Outstanding. And my name is Jonathan Shurts. I am here as part of the CWVFF team. I also am a post-production supervisor. As of late, had a background in visual effects and am working with Burns & Company on their last two productions, including Legacy Peak, which just released last year and is now on home media as of Tuesday. So, that's very exciting. So, anyways, with all that out of the way, I think that we should have a few questions in at this point. Would love to get those up on the screen. Here we go. And technical difficulties. Okay, so while we're getting that all prepped and everything's coming in, let's just really in a nutshell, like a half paragraph, what brought you to visual effects and why, or not visual effects, but to post-production in general? I'm sorry, my brain is in the visual effects space. What brought you to post-production and what keeps you there? Why are you in post-production? And again, maybe a paragraph for that. I can start with Bill.
I kind of stumbled into it. I went to school for business and really had no idea what I wanted to do with my life. And kind of got into editing because I liked computers. And at the time, I was switching over to Avid and, you know, all computers. And I loved it. I mean, the ability to tell stories and take footage, you know, that has been shot and shape a performance, to shape an emotion that you want the audience to feel is just, I'm addicted.
Understand that.
I worked from a very young age with my father in his video production business, so that's how I started, and I kind of started to specialize in After Effects, Adobe After Effects post-production as I started to learn that. But I've always enjoyed editing and enjoyed motion graphics and stuff like that. So I think it kind of, there's a natural transition to working with my dad and then starting to take on my own clients and becoming a freelancer and all of that.
I guess I got into post more as one, because I enjoyed it, but also as an option to work in one location and hopefully work from home and not have to travel as much and be on production. But then what keeps me there is I love working with directors and helping them realize their hopes and dreams with the pieces they now have to create the actual version of the story that the film will be, and being in that collaborative process of searching through, finding creative options to complete the story for the audience.
Outstanding. So we got some questions here, and I really love this first one here. And I'm going to give this little caveat here. There's a lot technically that changes. The post-production space is one where the state of technology takes things rapidly, and they change on a minute-by-minute basis. And it is kind of terrifying if you're in the middle of it. And again, this is a cutting-edge panel, and there is so much with the advent of free softwares, of AI even. It's going crazy. So looking more from a personal side, though, and we'll get more into the technical, what is something about post-production that you wish you'd known 5 to 10 years ago? I think thoughtfulness is one of those lessons I'm seeing. And
I would have wanted, I've said this in different settings here, but I would have wanted to have spent more time focusing on fundamentals and really how, everything works. Even in the production side of things, cameras, lights, storytelling. I think I would have wanted to focus a lot more on learning how to be a storyteller rather than just edit, videos that seem to have quick cuts and look cool. I would have wanted to have known that that was something I could really use and was worth doing. And I would have wanted to have known that relying on the idea of talent or intuition or being good at this was not enough to develop a strong career.
I'm going to answer it a little strangely probably, but I think the thing that I would have wanted to know is that it's okay to not be that great when you start. I think there's a lot of pressure to feel like, oh, I know what I'm doing, I know how to use the software, I know everything. And I'm learning all the time. Every job I learn something, and the software obviously, like you said, changes all the time. So you're having to learn new software and get into that, and that's okay. That's part of the process. I have 2 boys here that are 24, 26, and I'm like, you have decades to get good at your craft, and hopefully you're getting better every time, but you don't have to know it all right now.
I'll answer it this way in saying something I wish I had been better at and that I've been working on in the past 5 to 10 years as an introverted person that likes to sit at my desk in the dark for hours on end is how to be better at relationships and working with clients and working through problems and learning to listen and how to hear what their hopes and dreams are and being able to collaborate when I have different ideas, or how to then work on what they want to do. And that's a crucial part of post-production. It's part of anything, really, but in post-production, that's just where you're in such tight spaces and getting all that stuff done there that I think is very valuable and very important. And I wish I had been better at it 5 to 10 years ago, and something I keep working on.
Yeah, I think that's all fantastic. And the recognition of it's a growing process, and that humility, as well as the recognition that the fundamentals, again, of storytelling or of just interpersonal relationships, those are going to carry through. It's not just, hey, do you know how to do expressions in After Effects? That is so little of what is done.
What are you saying?
Or, we could say, do you know the right node to use in DaVinci? But what it comes down to is those fundamentals are what's going to carry you through. And ultimately, with all these things, story is king. What is the story that you're telling? What are we making? And making sure that is the best product possible. Okay, so next question is a really good one. And I'm going to broaden this a little bit from the direct scope of the question. It says, how do you stay motivated when editing for long periods? And a lot of this is going to apply as well for coloring for long periods or working on shots for long periods. I know there have been shots I've worked on for 3 weeks and gone, oh my goodness, I'm still knocking my head against the wall. How do you guys stay motivated? Again, and a lot of this too comes from the fact that in post, you're in a dark room by yourself working on this. How do you keep that motivation going?
David? Yeah. I've often liked to try and connect with something in what I'm working on that either I haven't done before or that maybe I've seen something like it or heard something like it elsewhere. So I remember one particular project. I was building a trailer, and I was really into these hits, you know, these noises, these just like drums, and you know. And I really loved watching that in trailers and hearing it and feeling that. And so that particular piece, I did a lot of that, and it was different than what I had done before. And that sort of gave a lot of momentum to finishing this thing out. And so things like that are personal. I'm connecting to this. And I know that if I can connect, my energy can connect, and now I don't have to motivate myself really to work on this. It's just kind of going, because I want to see this happen, and I'm doing this, so there's a sense of like, I'm a part of something. So that's really helped me kind of get that fire.
Yeah, for me, it was a learning process because I came from commercials, and it's 30 seconds to 60 seconds max, exactly. And all of a sudden I'm on Fireproof, and it's as long as I want this scene to be. And it's a marathon because I'd never worked on a feature, and you're working intense days for, a lot of days in a row, and it was exhausting. So you kind of, you develop, it's kind of like running, I guess. You develop endurance, but some of it is, too, you start to learn that you cut a scene at a time. It's like the old, how do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time. That's kind of how you make a feature film. It's one scene at a time, and just keep going, and then you get to the end and you put it together, and then you see what works and what doesn't, because you cut scene one weeks and weeks ago. So it's not getting wrapped up in this 2-hour process. It's just take it as you go.
I mean, it takes discipline. There's points where you just have to do the work, and it's not fun, and you feel stuck, and at least I do. I just have to go. You just have to sit there and go through this part of the process again so that you can get to the fun part of actually seeing it all put together. But going through different pieces, we may enjoy different pieces of it. Whatever piece that it's hard for you, you just have to do it sometimes. But staying motivated, a part of that is back to what you're saying, is break it down. Like, do a scene at a time. It's not the whole movie at once. And setting deadlines, setting realistic goals, and then just being disciplined to work towards them as you see progress helps stay motivated because you see it coming together. And that gets exciting when scenes start to match, and then you sit down and go now to the next one, and it's hard to be motivated for that one again, and you just do the work. But setting those goals and trying to be reasonable with that is helpful.
Yeah, and the more projects you work on, the more you understand process and what typically will happen and how you might feel along the way. And so you're able to measure, you say, okay, I've got a track record, I've delivered, okay, so this is like that. Even if it's new challenges, the more you do, the more confident you get that you can trust the process and, like you're saying, discipline and break it down.
But another part of it could be setting rewards for yourself. And for completing up to a certain point, when you get to here, go do something out of the office. And that can be as wide and varied as you want it to be, but go do something that will be exciting or interesting or spark your interest, and then know that you've committed to doing that once you've gotten to where you need to be in the work, and that helps as well, and then also actually helps break it up as you go through the long process.
Yeah, making sure that balance in life is a big key factor. Because if you can have that recognition that while this work is important, and yes, self-discipline, that recognition, again, I think it's interesting. You find themes to these different panels, and I think one of the big ones here is the basics. Come back to whatever those basics are, and a lot of that is going to be the self-discipline that's going to carry you through whatever it is that you're doing. but that recognition, this film is not the end all of my life. You can't have your identity and everything tied up in that, but do find those places. You can latch onto that. You can take that and, hey, fine, this is where I'm finding the joy in this thing that the Lord has placed before me, and I'm going to do it. And I'm going to do that to the best of my ability and run with it. So it's really great stuff, guys. So this next one, I think, is going to be, it's got some technical as well as some interpersonal here, and I'm going to broaden it again just a little bit. Question is, how do you collaborate with multiple editors? And I think let's also broaden this as well to colorists and other creatives as well, because again, sometimes you're going to be collaborating with multiple editors, sometimes it's going to be a VFX team, or you're getting color from you're getting color from set. So as applies to your field, how do you guys collaborate in a tools process, as well as how do you find that your workflow works best, and do you make that cohesion happen?
Well, no, I shouldn't say that. I'd say the movie I worked the most with multiple editors was Overcomer. So I came onto that movie actually late. Steve Hullfish was editing already, and I got to assist him for a while and then started cutting scenes with him. And honestly, that was the most fun I've ever had. We never get to work together. So it was fun to cut scenes and show another editor, what do you think? You know, what am I missing? Because you can get in the weeds sometimes and to really kind of lose like what's working, what's not. And then we'd switch scenes and then working with Alex later at the end is just always, great to get his perspective. But in terms of down the line with colorists and everybody else behind you, you realize very quickly that you're a team. You're not, you're going to be handing it off to an effects artist and a colorist and a sound mixer. And so you learn those tools pretty fast, and it's fun. I mean, I love working with the composer and the colorist and everybody, because you're all pulling towards the same goal and wanting to make it look and sound as the best it can be.
So with Alex, would you rough edit it and then he would fine tune? Because I heard somewhere that he's editing these movies. Is he editing it down the line?
Depends on which movie. But yes, he's editing on some level on every movie. Very much finished, fireproof. Courageous, I was editing on set, and then I actually had a full-time job that I had to take a leave of absence for. So Steve Hullfish came in and with Alex finished the movie.
You were editing on set?
Yes.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Can you say something about that?
Sure. That's actually how I got in, so I don't really know any different. I mean, I do now. I don't always edit on set, but at the time, I edited on set with Fireproof, and it was super fun and super distracting. So everybody wanted to see every scene every 5 minutes, but it was a blast. But it was also my honeymoon phase of editing. And then it changed over time. But editing on set, I love to do. It's really fun to motivate the crew and the actors and the director to see the movie coming together as you're shooting. Yeah. And then typically by the last week of shooting, I almost have an assembly edit done because we've been trying to keep up with production. We're a few days off.
Does that present a lot of complication as far as DIT and getting like intake? How are you able to edit like right away like that?
So usually I'm working. My son lately has been working with me alongside me as DIT and kind of assistant editor, a bit, where he'll be, backing up the footage, creating proxies, and then on the last movie we worked on, he'd also bring him into, I've been working in Resolve lately, and he'd bring it into Resolve, organize the footage, and which was great, because I don't know about you, but I almost never get an assistant, so you're doing all the grunt work, to organize, but it's a great workflow, and actually, depending on how the DIT setup is, with me and Cooper, we were in the same room working alongside each other, so it worked really well. And
are you editing same day? Like footage is shot that day? Next day. I got you.
Fireproof was actually the one, that was the one difference, because we were at the time with the technology, the camera they were using, the tape that the camera would record to was a lower quality than the SDI port out. So we went right into a Mac tower into Final Cut, and I was editing. I could literally edit when they said cut. I had the take. Wow. So that was super fun. But Courageous was shot, I think, on red, and those fun days were over. Yeah. So
That's really incredible. And for anybody who is newer to this world, DIT is going to be your digital imaging technician. That's going to be your person on set and taking everything, making sure that you actually have the movie, backing it up, all of that. You're going to have sometimes an on-set editor, which is going to be working on cutting those scenes, which is really incredible.
Sometimes it's the same person.
And sometimes it's the same person, as John-Clay would know. And then you're going to have the rest of your team that's helping. Assistant editor is going to be filing everything, making sure that the editor has just the best to work with and has things assembled in whatever way is going to work best for that individual's workflow. And a lot of this is going to be based upon what the workflow is of the production and the people working on the production. So JC, I think you had some notes?
Yeah, for collaborating, you need a process, and you need to be able to lay out a common structure. The more you employ other people or onboard them on the project, the more regimented things need to be so that things are organized and stay organized and efficient, because you have multiple people. When it's just you, if things get lost, you have to find it, but when they lose it, you have to find it, and so you need to have a process for how that's going to work. I've also done it where, way back on Pendragon, we were all editing in the same room, and you could, all on a server, and you could hop around, and we would take turns, and we'd edit, and somebody go, oh, I'm really stuck on this one, now you take a turn, and it was a lot of fun. Now, things have changed, and you can do that, remotely, and so we actually have a project where we have editors where we're doing remote projects with DaVinci Resolve Cloud, and we mailed out hard drives. And there's a lot of prep and organizational and process work that went into that we can talk about that later if you want to know the nitty-gritty, nerdy details of it. But that's been working really well, where we can all get in, and it's almost like the same room experience, the way they've developed it. I've worked with other editors before on projects. I had them come on and do collaborative things, but not in a shared way where multiple editors were all working on it. This one is, now that we have multiple editors working on the same material, and I can just hop in, log in, and go do things as well if I need to. And that's a technical side of how to collaborate.
Awesome.
And then Zoom calls. You got to get on. You can't just do the technical. You have to have the relationship thing. So getting on Zoom calls or some sort of video communication to then go over notes and go over things and make sure everybody's on the same team, because communication is key, and getting those multiple editors all on the same page and keep on track with your schedule.
Outstanding. David, any thoughts on that from a visual effects side?
Oh, I would just say that my opportunities to collaborate with artists, visual effects or motion graphics, has been some of my favorite memories, rather than just being one person working. I've picked up so many skills just learning from other artists, and I would just say it can be fantastic.
Yeah, and I think that one of the biggest things that was to pull out of what was said up here in this was figure out a system that works and stick with it, and then communicate. Those two things, because if you've got multiple people working on something in any capacity, again, this is post, this is pre-production, this is in general, if people aren't on the same page, you're going to have heads butting, or you're going to have technical issues. And a lot of that's going to come down to agreeing to a preset set of parameters. I know that whenever you're working on a lot of productions with an overarching body that is commissioning the work, they are going to give you a set of deliverables. And so you're going to know exactly what everything needs to be. You are agreeing to that. Or whenever you're setting out and saying, hey, this is our VFX shot naming and numbering scheme and how we're handling and transferring files. Set that, agree to it, have everybody on the same page. And it is really amazing these days because, again, Blackmagic Cloud and Premiere Projects, or Premiere Productions rather, as well as a lot of the other tools, Frame.io, all sorts of things where you can actually remotely work together. It's more readily available than ever, and it can be very much, again, just like being in the room or potentially the same thing or just a few degrees off of having that direct feed piped directly into your tower all those years ago. So it's really incredible where things are, and all of it just comes back to, hey, communicate, set up your system, figure out what's going to be the best tools for your workflow, and serve the production. Okay, ooh, this is an interesting one that jumped up to the top very excitedly. Where do you see post-production going with the advent of AI?
Away.
I haven't I haven't done much with the AI side of things yet, so people are still needing people to solve problems pretty heavily. I haven't done a lot of research on the AI side. Like auto color correction still doesn't work very well, so I don't know. I mean, I hear that there's things that can edit things for you and all that. I don't know how much that. I'm sure they'll get there where you can put in components for feel and audience response and reaction. But I mean, that's what you're looking for, is how does an audience respond and what is a director's idea and vision, and I don't know. I'm not going to be the guy that you have to be like, oh, look what you said 10 years ago. Like, it never could do that. Well, probably eventually. It's not really there, you know.
I would
right
love
now.
AI to read the slate and put all the data into my, that would be great.
Yeah, I will say, I think that one of the biggest things for AI, this has been an area of momentary research. So this is highly generalized. What I see is it's a force multiplier. Sure. It is something that you can use if you are able to jump into it. This is a really incredible area for young people to be able to experiment, to look at. A lot of it is free, open source. To be able to say, hey, how can I use this tool to expand upon what I could do otherwise? A lot of ways that you can utilize that for animation. Taking something that would take a long time to hand draw and to translate that. And again, it's a force multiplier. It's not going to replace, at least not at this stage. And people should not look to it to be their savior. What they should look at it as another tool in the arsenal, and recognize that it is becoming something that can be used for prime time. And literal primetime television and late night television, they're utilizing it for roto, key, some of these things that are more repetitive tasks. So look at it as something that you can use potentially, and I'd recommend doing research on it. Look and see what it is, what's out there, what can it do, what can't it do, and just have wisdom about how it's used.
Well, it's also a good starting point a lot of times. AI can take information and initially sort or initially set things up or initially even lay some things out, but it's the fine-tuning based upon preference that will take some time for that tweakability, which I still think someone will want to do or need to do, even if it is the director editing their own thing instead of hiring an editor, but that somewhere you're going to need extra sliders or something to fine-tune that.
Absolutely, and I think a lot of it comes down to that mindset of not relying on it too much. The recognition, you still need to have an artistic sense. You still need to understand how this is working. You need to have the understanding. You need to have a good story. If you can make the coolest animation ever, like there's some really incredible stuff where you're replicating hand-drawn animation right now with AI, or having it to create intermediate frames through Absinthe and some of the other tools out there. If you don't have something that is worthy of the time and effort that you're putting into it, or the actual understanding of how it works or why, how it works visually, what it's doing in the audience, it's not going to be of any help to you. So it can be something that can help you do things beyond what you could do necessarily on your existing budget or with traditional tools. But again, it's not going to replace, it's not a replacement, at least not right now. We'll see where it goes in the next few years. But I think we all know better than to just laugh off technology, and we also know better, hopefully at this point, than to believe that it's going to save us it's going to be our savior. I love this next question. Do you prefer being involved with a film during pre-production or wait till post-production? What are y'all's thoughts? And again, each one of you guys have got a slightly different perspective based upon your areas of expertise.
I think it's always helpful to be in a planning stage. That allows better material to be had when you get down the line to post-production, whether it's visual effects. It's helpful to have visual effects supervisors on set. If you're going to be editing, I'm a fan of having an editor read over a script even before you shoot it, because they can even help think through scene transitions or how other things might be done you know, from an editor, like you make sure to get this kind of coverage. I think you can have those kinds of conversations. That requires bigger budgets usually, and usually budgets are being stretched to the max and so post isn't usually brought on until much later. But it said, do you prefer being involved? And I think I would prefer, I mean, the times I've been able to do that, I think it's been helpful for me, for the director, and for the project overall.
Yeah, I've never been involved in pre-production, and there have been those times, you know, you read the script and you think, boy, I hope they cover this a couple different ways because I see a problem here, and you don't know until you get the footage, and then you're trying to fix it or cut around it or whatever. But I do think kind of the in-between, which, you know, I talked about, which I do love, is being on set, because I have had times where a director is, you know, because of the time, like we don't have time to shoot this, so how can we make this work? And I'll get grabbed and she'll be like, if I shot this, this, and this, would that, you know, cover it? And that's helpful for the director, you know, especially if a director is not an editor like Alex, because he can think through that in his head. But yeah, I don't think I've ever been involved in pre-production.
Yeah, and I haven't been involved that much in pre-production either. The one thing I can think of was more like a TV show, but it wasn't really like film pre-production, developing logo design and stuff like that. I would say it would really depend on kind of like the vision. You know, if it's a big effect shot or something like that, it's really helpful to get in on the ground floor so that the plates that are captured are conducive to the post-production.
Yeah, so I think a lot of this comes down to if you are in pre-production, it's helpful to be involved as early as possible. I'm sorry, if you're in post-production, it's helpful to be involved as early as possible in the process so that you can, if somebody's asking, yes, it's helpful to be involved. You know, if the producer's saying, hey, do you want to be in this conversation? Yeah, it's helpful. It definitely is great. And on the flip side, if you are in the production department and you're planning these things out, yes, it definitely helps, definitely in production, to have somebody from post or with that post mindset involved, because the more that you can plan ahead of time, the better things are going to go all the way down the line. And again, that comes down to editing, that comes down to visual effects. Did we actually, hey, talking to the visual effects soup, hey, did we light that green screen evenly enough for you? Or, or did we crank that shutter wrong? Or also, is this going to cut? Is this going to edit? It is very helpful. So as much foresight as you can have about what that end product is going to be, that's going to be helpful. Okay, so this is a very editing-heavy question. What's your favorite method of transition between scenes in a film or in a documentary? So I think that this could be a story point. What are some notes about transitioning between scenes?
I love cuts on action, even if it's transitions between scenes. It's the door slams and your new establishing shot or something.
So things that pull you in, things that put you in the moment.
Create some energy, and
engage you.
because a scene transition can be slow. You know, new establishing shot or whatever. So like, you know, propel me into the next scene.
It's awesome.
Yeah, I mean, I love it when directors think about those, because a lot of times you're cutting scenes together and then you put them together and you realize there is no transition and now I have to make one. And then you start, you know, whether it's pre-lapping audio or carrying score through or trying to find some camera motion that works to feel like a transition, that's my favorite, is when it's been thought about ahead of time, and Aaron talked about that in his talk this morning, which was great to hear. But yeah, I mean, I use them all. I mean, I try them all. I learn new ones, which, you know, I love to do. But yeah, when they're thought of ahead and you're putting it together and you're like, it makes us look good and we didn't really do anything, so.
Yeah, and thinking ahead means you can shoot something at the end of one scene that visually, creatively ties in, whether it's motion or a line of dialogue or where the lighting happens, whether it's a wide cut and the next one starts on a close-up that looks like it matches until you pull the camera back or push into reveal. Like, those are very creative transitions that have to be planned, that have to be shot, and are very rarely ever just found in editing to make something magically come together. But that makes the transition a story propelled by story. And like, there's one in Facing the Giants where at the very beginning, where the coach is really upset about losing the game and he throws his hat on the ground, but right in between the hat, they cut and it's a clipboard being slammed in the locker room. And that's a creative, you're tying two moments together with the same action that your brain would expect to see, but it's something different, but it's the same energy, same attitude, and you go, oh, I get it. And it says more than just cut between the two scenes. So my favorite, that's my favorite. Like, those are the most fun.
There was one, I think I might have seen like the hotel TV or something. It was like some show, and what it looked like to me was the end of a conversation, and the guy's sitting there, thoughtful about the conversation, cut back and forth, and then you have a shot of the guy, thoughtful. The background is different, but you don't necessarily register that until somebody says his name, and then you switch over and he's in a new environment, right? So you think, oh, he's still thinking about this, and you kind of almost forget. I was like, oh, wow, he's in somewhere new, he's in front of a camera, like, oh, what was that? Yeah.
So all of it comes down really to service of story. And the biggest thing with that to take in mind that I'm hearing from all this, you gotta plan it. These things that we're talking about in post-production don't happen if you don't plan them in pre-production, or at the bare minimum, whenever you're on set, going, hey, we know that this is what's gonna be. So a lot of it is gonna be planning ahead. If you are in this room or listening to this, and you are not in post-production, you're listening, hey, what do the post guys need? They need you to plan. And for the post guys, it's look for ways that you can help to uplift that story, to not just do the cool thing, because a cool thing without a flash, with no substance, isn't gonna draw somebody in. But if you can find the way to tie it in, that disorientation, where are we? That connection, this is we're in the same emotional place. And like you're talking about, the finding what serves that moment, that is what's going to help the post process whenever you're wrapping everything up, finishing it all up, elevate it to something beyond what it would be just, it's more than the sum of the parts.
My favorite is when they've planned anything but a fade to black. That's just so rarely the right answer. So just, even if it's a straight cut, just trying to find a way to transition, plan anything, even if it's a sad moment, trying to find some other way to communicate that instead of fade to black and then fade up in the middle of your movie. Fade to black at the end if you want to, but don't fade to black in the middle.
What about that thing I say on YouTube, like 1 hour later? The title.
Cut to it. Don't fade to it.
Again, with all of it, service of story, and rarely does a fade service the story. Okay, so this next question is pretty specific. Again, I'm gonna open this up a little bit wider. Question is, what is one of your favorite color looks or LUTs, and why? And I'm gonna open this up a little bit more. Your lookup table, that's gonna be a mathematical expression that tells it, take footage that looks like this and change the colors to look like that. So opening it up just a little bit, what's your favorite go-to tool? Because I know After Effects, you're gonna have your expressions and pieces like that. Color, you're gonna have your LUTs, and you may have some specific editing tools. So what's your favorite go-to tool, or maybe tool set? You might have a pack of LUTs that you go to. So what is your favorite go-to tool or tool set? You're like, okay, I need to get this in the ballpark. We're going for that.
I mean, I like tasteful teal and orange combo, tasteful, not too over the top, but the warm skin tones, and then the cool, environment that's always kind of nice. It's a specific tool. I think these guys would have a better answer. You don't use LUTs at all?
Well, typically I'll get the footage with the LUT. Yeah, I'm getting it on there.
So you're getting a LUT from the colorist or from set, the color decision table, and you're going to be or the color decision list from set. You're actually getting that from post or from set again to execute a creative vision. So you're not actually making those changes.
Yeah, usually it's baked in in the proxies when you're going to go to edit. They'll have something for cameras, a variety they've picked from, and they'll bake those in and then send them to edit, so that as you're watching the edit, it's not all that flat gray log, that has a little bit of pop to it. From a color perspective, my favorite one is the one that works. And so I like the way you expanded this, because it prompted a better answer in my mind. I use a lot of them from Triune Films. I have some other LUT packs, but I'm only usually applying a LUT on the tail end of color at like 16 to 25%. Like, it's just a minor tweak. I'm not using it as the majority of the work. I mean, there's the ones that convert from camera into whatever color space you're working in. That's a harder question to answer, because those are so specific to the camera and the settings that were used and so forth. I don't usually think of those as LUTs.
Those are just getting you to
Yeah,
base
they're more
footage.
utility conversion things, but from a color look perspective, I'd use them, very minimally to just kind of tweak.
Are you starting with a log frame and you're coloring from there? So what's the conversion part?
Right, so you need to know your output color space. And so most of the time, things are still done in Rec 709, which is just the broadest, most general sense. Everything is still shown in. The opposite, the other side of that would be HDR, which is being used but not as broadly. So you're converting from log into Rec 709, and that depends on all the cameras and all the settings and varieties therewith.
So you color after you convert.
It's just a basic conversion.
So you have to do a lot less work than if you were to start with a log.
Yes.
It gives you a across the board, we know that we're working from the same playing field,
Right.
and I know to bring it from here to here.
Right. But
Do you ever find that you lose too much information to be able to start with a Rec 709?
So it depends on the way you set it up. With DaVinci, there's ways in the project, you set it up so that you're working. No. I mean, if you're
Your
using,
highlights are too blown out. Your darks are too dark.
but that's not going to do that with a conversion. Like the conversion ones are just basic, and the information is still inside that container. Yeah.
Basically working non-destructively to add an adjustment layer so that all of your base data is still there.
Right. When you're using the color LUTs, that's where it gets more dangerous because it's a harder adjustment to the image than just the conversion LUT. The conversion LUTs are a lot softer in their approach. Like sometimes you're like, is it on or is it off? It's a lot softer in its approach to making it watchable. There's still a lot of work to be done.
So with all this, I think a lot of it comes down to there are not a whole lot of like one size fits all. Definitely no real one size fits all that take you from straight out of the camera or straight footage that needs stuff done to it and turns it into movie ready. There's going to be stuff that's going to be needed every step of the way to bring it, and again, service of story, service of the project, to bring it to a creative conclusion. And again, many different technical ways of doing it. And again, I'm just going to give a note here. As much as you can do non-destructively, because this little note right here about the color lookup tables is a big piece. As much as you can do non-destructively, especially if you're doing something for archival, is going to be really important because you want to make sure that decisions that you thought you made technically, Rec 709 has been the standard for years, and now seeing things come across the desk and it's like, hey, they want you to be able to deliver for Dolby Vision HDR with Rec 2020 primaries, and you go, what? And the entire workflow changes. Leaving yourself as much latitude as possible is really helpful. Okay, a good personal one. And to broaden out, not everybody on this stage is an introvert in reality. It's just an introverted profession. But any tips for networking as an introvert? Any tips as an introvert? How do you network?
Well, I am an introvert, so I can speak to this. Some of it is just getting over it, you have to put yourself out there, and to be honest, I'm an introvert specifically for doing something like this, but talking one-on-one, it's how I met John-Clay, was at one of these. It's how I'm meeting you at one of these. So it's just, getting to know people, and you'll find that one-on-one, it's not that hard. People genuinely are kind, and especially at a place like this. And yeah, you just have to kind of step out of your comfort zone, because otherwise you'll just be standing in the corner.
I agree. I'm not saying introversion is not a thing, but if it's about how you recharge, that's one thing. I find a lot of people, it's social anxiety, which is not necessarily introversion. So push past it as fast as possible, and the rest of your day is going to be a lot easier.
I am introverted, but I also like helping people and working with people, and so talking to people is how you start getting there so that you can work with them to help them on their project. And asking questions so that they talk and you don't have to talk is also a technique you can use. Yeah.
So you just repeat the last 3 words they said, and they'll talk forever, right?
Yep. Tell me more about that is a great one. Yeah, tell me more about that.
Yeah,
You learn.
go ahead, sorry. So a lot of it is going to come down to the recognition that, hey, people are not the most scary things on the planet, and also just having that heart of, hey, how can I serve? and being interested in what that other person has to say. It's going to be a really big piece of it.
Part of being introverted is you're thinking about yourself too much. And so start thinking about other people and be interested in them. And you realize most other people aren't thinking about you and worrying about you as you thought, which then you have to deal with the loneliness and isolation side of it when it comes to the introversion. But it's not as scary then to then go talk to other people and learn from them. And part of the introvertedness is when you feel like you don't know enough, you're not good enough, you're not adequate to hold a conversation with everybody else. That's when I tend to want to shrink back and not participate, because there's better people that know things than I possibly could. The truth is, we can all learn from each other somewhere. We're all still learning, we're all still growing. There's something even the person who's beginning probably knows and has figured out that I haven't yet, because there's new things coming with AI, and every software has a new update that I haven't had time to look into yet at a minimum. And so there's things we can do together. And so finding those areas and just asking questions and exploring that conversation is actually fun and exciting if you are interested in learning.
It's outstanding, outstanding thoughts. So this one, we get to go into the fun world of tech, hardware, and whatnot. What is your preferred, and again, this is going to be highly based upon where you're at and what you're doing, the kind of projects, and what your preferred workflow is, but what is your preferred hardware setup? Laptop versus desktop, how many monitors, mouse, keyboard, et cetera, et cetera. So what's your general, and I know we could all of us could go on for hours about our favorite keyboard configurations, but brief is helpful. And also, again, the caveat, a lot of the tools that these guys are using may not be accessible to a beginner, but it's really helpful to know, hey guys, this is where things are going. This is the technology you need to be looking at in the future.
Yeah, so I would say, I mean, my personal setup is I have an iMac Pro. I would love to have a second monitor. Right now, my desk's kind of small, so I have one monitor, and basic keyboard, nothing really too fancy. A couple speakers and stuff. But my friend, who's a CG artist, I mean, he does real octane rendering and uses Cinema 4D and is doing heavy stuff. He just told me that he has switched to a Mac M2 laptop for the majority of his work, if not all of his work. So he plugs that thing into his monitor. He can unplug it. He can work remote. He's got, I think, 4 terabytes on that thing, SSD. He's telling me that it's not quite as fast as his Mac Studio, but it's really good. And so that's mind-blowing that you can do that on a Mac laptop. Octane's now rendering on Mac. This is good news. So it's not actually as inaccessible as it relates to firepower and visual effects. It's coming for even more of the beginners in that particular regard.
That is incredibly exciting, and it's coming down to it's 2023 people, and really the only barrier of accessibility for making a good product is having a good story and the willingness to take the time to tell it well. Really, that's the barrier, because so many of these tools are low cost or entirely free. Again, a lot of the softwares that you'll hear people talking about, Blender, your DaVinci suite, it is free. Again, it's getting to the point, there is no excuse that your tools aren't good enough. Again, though, coming back to the hardware world, Bill, what is your preferred hardware setup?
Well, I mean, we always want something faster, it never fails. But my current hardware setup is I'm about due for a new one, but I didn't buy the iMac Pro because I think it was like $5,000 starting. And so I bought the iMac, loaded it up to the top with the fastest processor and RAM and all that stuff, and then ended up like around 3,500, I think. And I have to have a second monitor. I can't. Editing is so much like I need the real estate. So I have 2 monitors and nothing fancy. I mean, I have a mouse and keyboard that plug in USB. I don't do wireless because I just don't feel like changing batteries and all that kind of stuff. Charging it or whatever. So it can be very simple. And if your computer's slow, just make smaller proxies, and you can work around it. But it's just kind of personal preference.
I always hesitate with this question because I want people to feel confident to do work with what they have until it's actually hindering you from doing the work. Better technology and spending more money doesn't make you a better filmmaker or editor or colorist or any of the visual effects artist. It might help you get the work done better, but don't rush to spend the money and upgrade just because it makes you feel good. Because buying shiny new things can feel good. Okay, I just have to say that first. Preferred, I'm still on an iMac Pro, Intel, because I am waiting for the new iMac Pro, fingers crossed, something that's going to have the M1, 2, some version of chip in it. Because the laptops just don't have enough in-out ports for me. And the new Mac Studio barely does, and I would just prefer to have the screen all-in-one with the new processor chips. So I'm hoping that's coming around the corner. That would be my preferred, honestly. My preferred setup is not the one I have. And it's time.
Nor the one that exists.
Or does it? And we just don't know yet. Okay. So that's what I'm looking for is something in that range. I'm on the edge of upgrading that. I like to use a Wacom tablet. I still keep it plugged in because I don't like the Bluetooth version of it. I don't use a mouse anymore. And then for color, I have one of the DaVinci panels that has the wheels and buttons and things because it's faster. It's not how I started. I used with the mouse. I started with the Wacom, and then I started with small panels, and then I upgraded to bigger panels. So it's been a long road over 10 to 15 years of slowly upgrading as I've been able. But I do enjoy those tools when helping get things done efficiently.
I do love using a Wacom tablet. I use it as a mouse. I love to have a magic mouse on the other side too, so I can scroll with 2 fingers. So I'm in a web browser and I don't have to click on the sidebar. I can just kind of navigate like this and then scroll with 2 fingers on the other side. So
Use the wheel. The wheel goes.
The wheel. I don't have a wheel.
Oh, okay.
I got just a.
Oh, I got that. I got one of the Wacom Pro. I guess has the wheel thing on.
I don't have the wheel.
Okay.
He has the wheel. Dang it.
So all of this is coming down to look at what you actually need out of the tool. And again, don't use your tool or your lack thereof as a crutch. Looking at post-supervision, I've just moved into a more color-accurate Aces monitor, and the amazing thing was to see you can now get that without having to move into a Flanders Scientific, which is wonderful and helpful. But look at what the technology can do now. It's not the same thing. That Aces is not going to be as perfect as it, but it's looking at what is it that you actually need for your use case. And what is it what's looking at the difference between need and want.
For reference, for client reference for color, we use the iPad Pro 13-inch is referenceable, as well as the new MacBook Pro, I think with the M1 or M2 chips, not the Air, the MacBook Pro versions have monitors, because I have a Flanders, and I have the iPad, and I've been able to compare them all and would trust reference. Now, as a colorist, I'm using the Flanders as my base, but for client reference, yeah, there's a lot of other tools that are accessible.
What is client reference?
That means that when I'm doing color work, they're watching the work and going, I like it or I don't like it.
They're right there with you.
No. They either have a laptop at their house or I mail them the iPad and they look at it so that they go, I don't like this.
Oh, wow,
I know that what they're referencing as a client is what I'm seeing.
So you make sure they have the right device to look at yours.
Yes.
Oh, wow.
Well, otherwise we're arguing over colors. Theirs is because their monitor's too yellow. That's why it looks bad. It's not because it doesn't look yellow. And then you're over the phone like, well, what does it look like? And you're like, well, it's not looking like. So you just get the right monitors that all look the same.
Yeah, it makes sense.
So all that just comes down to, again, looking at it and saying, what is it that we need in our use case? And make the most of it. You may be on the kind of project where you can't afford the Flanders and the iPad Pro, and that is fantastic. And again, that is a level of accessibility for color-accurate reference that we have never seen before. At the same time as well, look for things that could be force multipliers. One of my favorite things that I use whenever I'm working on my Mac is a Logitech gaming mouse and keyboard because it gives me more buttons. It just gives me more buttons. And also Logitech is Mac compatible.
You get an ergonomical, is that the word? Mm-hmm. Chair?
Yes, that is a huge piece. Or a standing desk. These things that keep you from doing all of the standard post-production things of hunching in a dark room, huddled over a little screen, killing your eyes. So a big part of it, though, again, what is the tool that you need? What is the tool that you have? How can you maximize that? And then as well, making sure that you're not relying so much on that tool that you're losing your own skills. And I know for me personally, the use of that Logitech, I can customize it, have all my macros, I hit one button and it does 3 things, and then the recognition, oh no, what if it goes down? What if Apple doesn't support that anymore? And that's a nightmare. And the recognition, looking at it, having a wise view of it, and having those perspectives can be really helpful. Well, we are rapidly approaching the end of our time, so I would love to get any closing thoughts that you all have. It's fun to see how these questions all seem to have common themes and threads. So closing thoughts based upon what we've talked about here for folks who are here in the room and or watching online. We'll start with JC.
I would just say as you're in post-production, remember that it's not about you. One, you should be hopefully I love working with people that we can be serving God in kingdom purposes, and that's an easier, it's not about you. But when you're working with a director, your job is to serve them and help them as much as you can. It's not about you. And that takes a lot of pressure off for me, and actually makes for a better working relationship. It's mostly about the audience. Hopefully you can work with directors that care about the audience. But you're trying to help the director reach the audience.
I've found that exposing my work for review and even criticism has been really beneficial, and making friends with that process has been great. So you don't always have to hate it the way you may now. Make friends with the fear of your work being criticized, and just kind of get used to it, and your work will probably be improving.
That's great advice.
Yeah, I agree completely. The more you get used to that your first cut is not the best cut that's ever, possible, you start to welcome critique, and you realize, oh, that comment makes this scene better or makes the story better, and that's exciting as the editor, not, oh, they don't like my work. So, and then I would just say, just get started. I know that's the hardest part is, I want to do this, but I don't know where to start. Shoot something, cut it together, get your, brothers and sisters or your buddies to run around the yard and film, a fight scene or something, and just go from there, because you'll learn so much, and, and then just keep going, meet people, and try to get on projects, and, it takes time.
I want to add one last one to kind of answer this question on tips for getting clients for editing, but ties into pray about it. Pray about it before you realize you don't know what to do. But when you don't know what to do, YouTube doesn't have to be the first thing you go to. Pray for wisdom. Pray for God to bring clients, to open doors, to work with people. This has got to be more than just what we can do with cool hardware in our brains. We want this to be something that God gets glory for, and that comes from relying on Him and seeing what He does.
Outstanding, and I really appreciate you guys and the heart that you've brought to this. Again, so much of this comes down to the basics of story, the basics of honoring the Lord, the basics of what are we doing here to serve the audience. We are here with a heart of service to those who came before us in the production, and those who are going to be watching the product, and those who have actually hired us, or whatever the client may be, as the case may be. And so it's really this amazing honor to get to be able to be the folks that see the product to completion. And yeah, like was said, just start doing things, start experimenting, and my note is don't utilize your lack of ability or your lack of access to specific tools as a crutch to not try, to not learn, and not to make great work, because you can be learning, you can be growing, and you're going to be on a learning and growing experience the whole way through your career. So start now. It's really good.
So Hans Zimmer, he says, the ideas come from a kid on an iPad in the Bronx. So anybody can do this.
It's true. It's really true. So anyways, guys, we've hit the end of our time. Thank you all for being here in our Cutting Edge Post-Production panel. We'd love to close us out in prayer, and then we're going to have 30 minutes to be back in this room, go out, fellowship, come back, 30 minutes. It's going to be our closing guild session, which is incredibly exciting and amazing that we are at the closing guild session for 2023, the 10th annual CWVFF. So it's really exciting. So we'll close this out in prayer, and then you guys are dismissed. Dear Heavenly Father, I just thank you for each person in this room, Lord, and who's watching this session, Lord. Lord, we thank you for the opportunity to be in the arts, to be communicating your truth with people. And as workers to be those who do the final handoff of that work to the audience. Lord, I pray that you would be present in these productions. Lord, I pray that you'd be present in this event, Lord. I pray that you would encourage hearts, encourage for the long roads ahead, and Lord, I pray that in the work that is done by people in this room, those who will watch this later, Lord, that your name would be glorified. I thank you for each person on this panel and each person present, Lord. Continue to guide the event, guard the event, Lord, and be glorified in this place. We thank you. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. Thank you all so very much.